Hey guys, welcome back to another episode of the Mind Muscle Connection podcast. Today is a solo episode, and I want to discuss just a health update and health and fitness update on myself. We'll dive into a little bit more around like the phase I'm in, what I'm looking for, some things that I'm trying to work on, what I was trying to initially work on, and it didn't necessarily pan out for me. And I think it relates to some of my recent content. Deep dive, not a deep dive, but a dive into my blood work, some recovery things that I specifically try and work on, and just some extra thought around blood work. This is more of a kind of case study of myself. And so hopefully you'll get some good information here to take into your own training, nutrition, health, fitness, whatever it may be. But first, before I dive into that, I just want to go over my free body recomp checklist. With this checklist, I go over the 10 things you need for body recomp, the 2 different types of body recomp, what is body recomp, the importance on focusing on body composition over just scale weight. And so the link to that is in the show notes. So go and check that out. All right, let's dive into today's topic. Like I said, this is going to be a case study on myself. And then I'll just talk about what I'm going just update on my training too, what that looks like and everything like that as well, what I'm working on from that perspective. Cool. All right. So I'm in what I call a performance building phase. And when we're looking at body composition and the difference, I like to do this I don't always like to be in a deficit. I like for myself and for clients to periodize our caloric intake. I think that you're going to get the most bang for your buck when, you have these periods of time where maybe you're dipping into a deficit and then the rest of the time you're fueling enough. And now what that fueling looks like specifically is going to depend on our goal and what we're trying to accomplish there with that and just how somebody's body responds. And inside a building phase, like there's multiple different things that you can work on, right? A lot of people think a building phase has to just be this phase. It has to be a phase where you put on body fat and you bulk and you put on as much muscle as possible. And it doesn't have to be that, right? Like the building phase is essentially a phase that you're going to be in outside of a deficit phase. And this can be done at maintenance. This can be done in a surplus. You can have other goals within this. It can literally just be, hey, like I'm not necessarily trying to push anything super hard. I'm just trying to build a little bit, whatever I can, given the effort I want to put in right now. But we're still building positive habits. We're still building things towards improving your body composition in the long term. Again, maybe it's not a hard push like you maybe would do that you would always do there, because unfortunately with health and fitness and body composition, it's one of those things where there isn't this like peak where you reach and then you're good and you don't have to do anything. Like you're always actively having to do things and push forward. It is one of those things where you can't just do it and then, okay, cool. Now I can just sit back and have this sort of like passive income where I don't have to actively work on things. It's just not going to happen, right? You're always having to do it. And so if we're not, then we are unfortunately backwards. Now, what that looks like in between, or what that actually looks like is maybe it's more of a quote unquote maintenance, but we still are doing like, even if I don't think you can just maintain what you have. I think, again, you're either going back or we're moving forward. And the pace at which we go forward can be very small, or we can push things a little bit more if it lines up with where you're currently at there. And so I think, like I said, if we're not in a phase where we're actively fat loss dieting, we're in a building phase. Now, what that phase looks like just depends. And so for me, I'm calling this is a branch of a building phase, is a performance building phase. And so what my goals are in this phase are going to be, one, I'm just trying to make sure I'm fueling enough, eating enough calories plus micros, because I think a lot of times when people hear eating enough, they simply just think calories, but we could eat enough calories and still be energy deficient by not fueling enough with micronutrients. So we still need to have a balance, right? I still need to make sure I'm getting enough protein. I need to make sure fiber is balanced. I need to make sure I'm getting enough carbs. I'm hitting the right fats, the amount of fats that I want to hit as well too, right? From a micronutrient standpoint, making sure that I'm hitting all those. So just making sure I'm feeling enough. And what I'm doing with that is really I'm not actively tracking calories and macros. I have a structure of how many meals I eat per day. Sometimes that changes a little bit, but I have that as my base, and then I can slightly alter it if I need to. Have a few meals that are very similar each and every day, maybe some small changes. And then I have when I'm looking at what I'm eating for the week, when I go to the grocery store, making sure I'm checking all of my checks and balances from that perspective. Maybe that would be a good thing to go into. I made this post a couple weeks ago on this, but some foods that are in my staple, they're going to be weekly staples, are going to be getting some nuts in, right? Making sure I'm getting in healthy fats. You're getting a little bit of fiber in. Salmon or other fish, we're getting our omega-3s, healthy fats, and obviously you're getting some protein in there. 93% ground beef. I like it. I personally like it leaner anyways, but again, you're getting zinc, B vitamins, protein, etc. with lean ground beef, right? And obviously that's some red meat. I try to limit red meat to 1 to 2 times a week. If I go higher than that, it's fine, especially if I zoom out and it's relatively stable, right? Maybe it's like, hey, 1 week it's closer to 2 to 3, then the next week it's closer to 1, right? And so long as over time it's relatively balanced there. Chicken's in there. Obviously, you're getting a lean source of protein with that. You can do a lot of different things with chicken. Greek yogurt, basically live off of Greek yogurt. I probably have 1 to 2 per day. You're obviously getting calcium, you're getting protein, and then good prebiotics as well too. With you're getting some of that dairy, which is the calcium there. Oats, you're getting fiber in, slower digesting carbs, so good source of carbohydrates. Blueberries and other berries, like sometimes we'll swap in some like strawberries and raspberries and stuff like that, but mostly getting blueberries. Like that's the most common one that I have. Rice, I'm like, I've always enjoyed rice. Again, you can just do so many different things with it. And it's easy to digest carb. It sits well with my gut. Actually, jasmine rice specifically is what I use. Not that there's anything special to jasmine per se, but I like it, tastes good. And like I said, it's good on my gut. Spinach and kale's in there basically every single week, probably multiple times a week. Obviously, fiber, micronutrients, those are my leafy greens there. Extra virgin olive oil for healthy fats. I have a salad dressing that has a base of that. Obviously, you have to watch, with fats, you have to watch the energy density of them on there. Olives, I'm a huge olive fan. Again, healthy fats is what I'm looking at there. Eggs, try to eat those 1 or 2 a week. You're getting protein, but obviously you're getting some choline in there as well too. And then healthy source of fats. And then I like to get dairy for the calcium and protein, typically going to be through 1 to 2% milk, reduced fat milk there, and then cheese, right? I do think there is some benefit to getting a little bit of fat from dairy and getting that, and then plus you're getting that calcium. And then I really like cinnamon. That's probably a base there. And then these are going to be what I would call more energy dense foods that are going to be more phase dependent, but they're usually pretty much a weekly staple for me, right? So these are going to help me hit my calorie targets and enjoy my diet. And like I said, how much and what depends on the phase I'm in. We're looking at bagels. That's usually my sort of pre-workout meal. Peanut butter is in there, usually daily. Granola, I like to throw some granola in my Greek yogurt. Again, you're getting a little bit of protein there, obviously adding the taste as well too. Pasta is something that we'll switch out and have as sort of my carbohydrate. Really like pasta with red sauce. Like I love that. But we'll also do it with chicken, shredded buffalo chicken with pasta there. Again, obviously with pasta, it is energy dense. So you do have to watch that there. You have to be careful with serving sizes on that. Bananas, again, someone might hear that's a fruit. I thought that was good. And it is, but it is something that if we look at things from a fruit perspective, strictly fruit, probably a little bit more energy dense and just something, and it doesn't have as much fiber. And so we just need to, I just don't want that to be like the only source of fruit that we always get. Kodiak cakes, usually make these on the weekends for breakfast. Again, tasty, gives me a good amount of carbs, I especially like doing this on Sunday when I have hockey. And then like other tasty foods that I'll have like throughout the week are going to be things like pizza, like usually do pizza or like some sort of French bread pizza once a week. Sushi, it's just text my wife, I think we're going to do sushi tonight. So we usually do that once a week, usually flip-flop between like pizza and sushi. Chips and salsa, sometimes I'll have that before I'm like cooking, like when I'm cooking dinner and getting dinner ready. And that's a mistake. You got to be careful with that. That's an easy way to just overconsume calories. And I also do find too, like when I do that, when I have chips and salsa before a meal or just have any sort of snack before a meal, the dinner meal is not less satiating, but less satisfying. So definitely pay attention to that. I could see where, so I'm just thinking about this, I could see where that becomes problematic for people, where you're hungry, so you have something tasty, and then now the food that's really going to nourish you, it doesn't taste as well there. And you see this when you're fat loss dieting, because you're probably, if you're nailing your fat loss diet and you're doing well, you're probably not snacking on foods throughout the day. And not only are you in energy deficit, you're leaner, so everything tastes better. But man, dinners are just like so much more satisfying. That's probably another downside there of just grazing and snacking throughout the day, is meals become less satisfying there. And then you don't really get that, you don't really crave that sensation. And so then like you continue to want more there. So definitely be careful with that. I will have some cookies too, depending on what we have. For example, this week we bought Colby some Pop-Tarts, and like I've been having a little bit of those. So like I'll have some of that stuff. Again, I'm not eating it by itself. I'm pairing it with my morning smoothie. I'm pairing it with other things. So I'm not having it just by itself. Pretzels, I usually like to have that with my pre-workout meal. Again, you get some sodium, some carbs, lower in fat as well too. And then obviously adding in sauces and condiments for flavor and taste. And then I'll typically do about 1 to 2 glasses of wine per week for enjoyment. Now, if I'm actively trying to fat loss diet, I'm probably going to change this around a little bit, right? Just because calories are going to be lower. But when I'm trying to fuel and get enough food in, like I'm going to have a little bit more of this. And then other things that are rotated in based on the week, like I would say all those things I just talked about are pretty much staples each and every week. And then from there, I'll rotate things in. other greens and colorful fruits and veggies, things like red peppers, oranges, apples, etc., just depending on what we have around the house. Some mushrooms, big fan of mushrooms, so like I'll put those in my salad. When we do like pizza, I'll put that on. We'll get cucumbers every once in a while, some tomatoes, edamame, a great way to get extra protein in, like to pad your protein numbers, and you get some fiber as well too. But there are carbs and a little bit of fat in edamame, so you just need to account for those things. Potatoes, usually not sweet potatoes, but I definitely would recommend sweet potatoes for a lot of people. And then avocados, right? You're going to get healthy fats, potassium, and fiber in there with that. And then as far as my supplements go, we're looking at creatine 5 to 10 grams per day, magnesium glycinate 200 milligrams at night, L-theanine 200 milligrams in the morning before I start working, and then 200 before bed. Fish oil, I'll do 1440 EPA, 960 DHA. So that's essentially what we want to hit there with the fish oil are those numbers. Vitamin D, 5,000 IU, and then I'll typically do about melatonin 3 milligrams per night there. I actually just added in psyllium husk as well too, to just help hit fiber, but that is a good source of fiber, and just testing that out to see what works there. With my nutrition, my goal is to cover my nutritional base first and then think about food from that standpoint, right? Like making sure I'm hitting those numbers. And by focusing on this, it allows me to not have to track every last calorie and macro, because I feel like at that point, it really helps you regulate your energy needs. Yes, you still need to control things. You can't just go crazy with it, but definitely helps me control things and gives me a good base from there. And then from there, I'm layering in foods that I enjoy while making sure my overall energy needs are being met, right? Through my biofeedback, my performance, and where my weight's trending. I would say for me, probably the two biggest areas I can improve from a nutrition perspective would be probably a little bit more plant-based protein sources, maybe a little bit more variety there, probably a little bit more variety overall if we're like talking for nitpicking there, and then just more fruit and veg variety as well too there. So those would be the big things. That's typically what I'm trying to do from a nutrition perspective there. So that's what I mean by making sure I'm feeling enough. And then my other goal of this phase is I want to put myself in a position to add whatever muscle I can. I think this is where I want to get people to be of like, let's just do this. Let's not stress over how much muscle we're putting on. Let's just put ourselves in the best position possible to put on as much muscle as we can, because that to me, it's like, that's going to align better with where you're at in your life. You're not trying to fit a square peg in a round hole with this. It's just, okay, here's what you want to do. Here's your sort of the muscle growth potential that you have right now. Here's the best way we can get to that. And then what you actually do is going to set where that is, right? So it's okay. You can only train 3 days a week. You have other things that you do. It's like, you can only build so much muscle. Like we're still going to do things to help, but it's like, you can't expect to maximize muscle growth when you're training, say 3 days a week. People just think that they can, hey, I can only train an hour a week. I don't like protein. I don't want to eat protein. I don't want to mess with my sleep. I want to be able to snack. I want to go out on the weekends. And if I'm not feeling it, I don't want to do it. But I also want to build as much muscle as possible. It's okay. We can set you up to build as much muscle as possible, but the potential of that is going down because of the things that you're doing, right? And the best case scenario, right, if we were really to look at, okay, if we wanted to grow the max amount of muscle, it would be, hey, let's probably train 5 to 6 days per week. You really need to dial in sleep. You need to make sure you're feeling enough. You need to make sure you're not missing out on any micronutrients, right? And then from there, it's like you're probably putting yourself in the best position. But for a lot of people, they're not able to do that. My thought on this is I'm just trying to put myself in the best position to add whatever muscle I can, right? Based on where I'm currently at in my life, what I'm trying to do, etc. there. So I guess you could say adding muscle is a priority, but I'm also like not overly concerned if I'm not necessarily adding a ton, because at the end of the day, like I'm not by any means the biggest person in the world, but I have a decent amount of muscle. I've been doing this for a while. So like ability to continue to add more muscle is, I have to really be on top of things. And it's right now, this isn't my number one goal. So I just have to understand what's going on. So it's like, I'm just going to try and add whatever I can. I'm really just trying build things for the long run. And so that's why it's like, I wanted to get my blood work done, because it's like, hey, are there things that I can maximize to get the most out of what I'm currently doing, to where it's like, hey, I have this low hanging fruit that I can get more out of improving my body composition without having to add in a ton of extra time, right? Because we'll talk about what my training looks like. I think the biggest thing I could do is I could probably do more volume potentially, right? But it's like, all things considered, everything I want to do, this is where my volume's at. So then the next thing that we can pull is going to be like, is my quality of training there, and making sure that's dialed in. So making sure I'm set up to have my best training sessions possible. And like, to be transparent, it's like I've had days where I've had to train later at night. I'm probably not going to have my best training sessions. When I train, like I train later in the day, I get my work done, I do other things first. And from a mental perspective, I'm probably not firing on all cylinders there. I have other things going on now where my recovery's hurt. So is just not as good as it used to be, mostly from a sleep perspective. So it's like, that's going to impact my ability to add muscle there. But I'm just trying to do whatever I can there. And I think one thing is by looking under the hood and seeing from an overall health perspective where you at, and seeing if there's any low-hanging fruit there. And we'll talk about what that looks like for me specifically here, bring it back to building muscle there. So I hope that makes sense, right? Like I think I explained that well, but definitely coming on here and doing this helps of me being like, okay, like I want to add muscle, but for me, it's the long game and trying to maximize what I'm currently doing before it's like feeling like I just need to throw a bunch more on there at this point. And saying that, I guess the other way to put this is, and this is going to make sense here, I want to build performance in cardio, lifting, and life. And so I want to feel as good as I can and to be able to show up for my family, clients, and in life. So that's priority number one, probably. And if it was strictly, so it's like that needs to be done first, and then adding whatever muscle I can in that situation really is where I'm going to be. Now, again, other certain things that I could maybe do from a meal timing perspective to maybe get a little bit more out, making sure that could I get a little bit more out if I did my training earlier in the day before I started doing work and I didn't have as much cognitive fatigue going into my sessions, things like that. There's just trying to do as much as I can with what I have going on. And I think it just comes down to the quality versus just trying to focus on quantity of doing more stuff. And I think you can apply this to fat loss as well too. A lot of people try to mess with the quantity. And what I mean by that is they try to just continue to decrease calories. Hey, I need to do more exercise. Hey, I need to do more steps. Hey, I need to just eat less. When really there's probably a lot of levers we can pull from a quality perspective to get more out of what you're currently doing. And that's where we look into things like your circadian rhythm, stress load, your overall nutrition patterns. What are things that we can change there? Is it meal timing with that before we just feel like, hey, we need to continue throwing more stuff on to the situation. And then one that I didn't say is just improving long-term health. So whatever that looks like, and that's where the Bloodwork sort of things came in here. But again, build performance in cardio, lifting, feel good in hockey, make sure that I'm feeling good when I train or when I play hockey. It just really just looks like, hey, I feel good out there. I have the energy. I'm not getting overly tired. I'm not beat up when I play a couple games. And then obviously cardio is just like, hey, I'm trying to improve what I can do from that perspective there. And then obviously showing up in life. So again, that's, hey, making sure I have the energy to play with Colby at night, be able to run around with him and not feel super beat up, but also get the stuff done around the house and life that need to get done as well too. And then obviously show up for my clients, making sure I'm in the best position possible to show up for them. And I think that's where nutrition plays a role. I think that's where recovery plays a role. I think that's where looking at your blood work can play a role, right? Of maybe there's some things that you can fine tune to feel even better. And then that's where even improving your cardiovascular fitness allows you to be able to handle more and to recover from it and to be able to get more out of what you're doing there. So that's kind of what I mean by when I'm in a performance build phase. So my initial goal with this phase was keeping my weight under 160. And because I wanted to see if I can maintain it, because I never really maintained under 160 for a long time, really ever since I probably in my mid to early 20s, put on a ton of weight to try and build muscle. I don't think I've ever been under 160 for extended periods of time. I've dipped under it for fat loss phases. I've gotten as low as probably mid 140s, high 140s for bodybuilding competitions. And I think a photo shoot, I got that low, but I've never really maintained under 160. It's always been back in between 160, 170. And even since then, I've probably pushed close to mid high 170s one time in a building phase, probably back in like 2021 there. So I was seeing if I could maintain it, but I did start to realize I wasn't going to be able to eat the amount of food I wanted to keep me feeling my best in my workouts and just in life under 160. I was just starting to feel recovery was taking a hit. I was hungry, and the amount of food I wanted to eat to feel good and to enjoy as well too. It just staying under 160 just wasn't going to be feasible. And I was starting to I got down to 155, 156-ish, probably August-ish timeframe, maybe a little bit later than that, maybe closer to August, September-ish, somewhere around there. And then I was able to keep it under 160 until around holidays. And then that's where I did see it start to come up there. But the cool thing though is, so my body weight has slowly climbed to 163 to 165-ish, but performance and body comp are my main drivers and both are in a good spot. So I'm happy, right? Like overall, I feel good from a performance perspective. I think recovery's a little bit under. My blood work does confirm that. So we'll talk about that. Body comp's still good. Like I feel relatively good. There's times when I look and I'm like, not overly thrilled, but for the most part, I feel good about my body composition when I can still see my abs when I flex. So that's good. That's always a good sign. So I'm still staying fairly lean and I feel like I'm fitting my shirts out better. So this is a good kind of spot to be in, right? And so this is why I don't like to over focus on arbitrary scale numbers. Instead, we want to have our body comp and biofeedback and performance really be our guiding factor outside of a fat loss phase. Just because I see too many, I tried to do this, right? I tried to stay under 160, and this is going to look different for everyone. There's no arbitrary number of, okay, you need to stay under this. It's going to be different for everyone where you feel your best. And so you need to see where that is. If you listen back to my episode I did on Monday, I talked about some potential issues of trying to stay too lean and what can happen there, right? And so it's better to find a range where you feel you look good enough, performance is good, and whatever that range is and wherever you're at there, that should be where you try and sit most of the time versus trying to maintain a super lean look 24/7. You can do it, but there's going to be some potential downsides of that, and definitely have you listen to that episode. That will be super helpful to get a better understanding. But again, body comp and biofeedback needs to be our guiding factor here. If I'm in this phase and that's okay, yeah, body comp's really good. I feel super lean, but I'm also like, God, recovery just hasn't been as good. I'm just not feeling like my training's going really well. It's like, I'm just like, I haven't been able to progress in a long time. Libido's just not that great. Things like that. Then it's like, okay, it could be a fueling thing. It could be like, hey, I need to add more calories, or maybe recovery needs to be dialed in, or it could be a combination. And usually it's a combination depending on where you're at in terms of body composition there. So again, I definitely would have you go listen to that episode I did on Monday. I believe that was episode 7, 8, I think there. So that's kind of where I'm at in terms of what I was working on. So we'll kind of dive into my blood work. So I recently got my blood work done. I hadn't gotten this labs ever. And so I needed to see, not only did I want to, but I needed to see what was going on under the hood. So I needed to see if there was any long-term health risks that I needed to know about, right? Diabetes runs on my dad's side of the family, cardiovascular disease. So I need to look into these things and make sure that I'm in a good spot for long-term health there. And so when I got these back, nothing stood out that requires me to drastically change my focus, other than really a lot of the numbers show I just need to stay on top of recovery, especially sleep and probably caffeine intake. To me, that was the biggest thing that, if I look at where I'm at right now, that probably why some of these numbers showed up the way they did there. So what were some of these numbers? So when you look, my total testosterone was solid. So I was 707. So that's good, right? That's on the higher end of the Western medical range, which you need to be careful with that. That's probably not the greatest number to potentially look at there, but I definitely feel like, hey, it's not tanked. So total testosterone is fine. However, free testosterone is slightly lower than ideal in what I would want. Like it's still, again, in that sort of Western medical range on the lower end of what they were talking about, what they suggest, right? I think 8.7 is that number, the low end. So I was definitely on the lower end. So basically the actual free testosterone, which is what your body uses, that's not as high there. SHBG is on the higher end, which is sex hormone binding globulin. And essentially that's where a lot of my testosterone is getting caught up in. And usually when stress is high, and if you think about what I've discussed, stress is, yes, it's perceived stress. Hey, I'm pissed at my boss. Hey, I got in a fight with my significant other. Yes, that sort of stress, but also just overall stress load, lack of sleep, high training load, just always being on. There are things that I feel like I have. And so it's like just a lot of signs that there's high output and just high stress load on my body. So SHBG will be on the higher end. You also see SHBG go up in men and when they've been low carb for a while, underfueling for a while, underfueling relative to leanness. And so again, it's, hey, your testosterone's fine, but then your free T is getting caught up in that SHBG there. So again, really just focusing on recovery and lowering overall stress load is the takeaway I had with that. But to further that, reverse T3 is on the higher end of the range. And so essentially you have T3 is an active thyroid hormone, right? So same thing, similar to free testosterone, that's the number that's the active form of it. And so reverse T3 was on the higher end. So that means that some of my T4 is getting converted into T3 or reverse T3, which is the non-active version of it. It's related, it's stress related there as to why that would be high. And T3 was on the lower end of the range. And so T3 is that active hormone that drives metabolism there. And so what this told me is, again, just when you look at all these patterns, just a lot of signs that there's a lot of output and high stress on my body. And so just watching that there. And so what that means for me is I felt like I just need to continue to double down on good recovery, reduce unnecessary stressors, and eat in a way that doesn't lead to underfueling, because that's a big thing, right? If you like to train a lot, plus you have other life responsibilities, you have to recover and fuel for that. AKA you can't live in a deficit year round and be in that low energy availability state year round. Most people, for me, it's not a training issue, like I'm training too much. It's just relative to where I'm at, probably on the higher end. So that just means I need to double down on these things, because most people don't need to worry about overtraining. They just need to make sure they have things outside of the gym dialed in, which they don't. It's usually do more, eat less, try and stay lean. And that's where you can run into some issues. To come back to what I discussed about, hey, putting myself in position to add whatever muscle I can, these are probably going to slightly impact that a little bit, slightly impact my ability to be able to do that. And so this is the thing where it's okay. So instead of trying to do more training, do more to build more muscle, that's probably not my thing that I need to worry about. It's making sure I'm recovering and fueling enough in that process there. Because that itself, I could sit here and try and do more training, push harder, but again, that's probably just going to continue to lead me down this rabbit hole of the under recovery side of things. And that's the thing with blood work, right? You're not trying to you're not looking at one metric, one marker and be like, oh, this is what's going on. You want to look at other things in combination as well too. And what are the general patterns telling you? And here's the other thing that I don't have. I don't have previous blood work. So I don't know where this is, if it's trending up, if it's trending down. I don't have that information. And that's obviously the downside of not getting it done. And whenever I do this again, it will be interesting to see where it goes from there. And this is another important point. If I were to do this now and I did it in this state where I'm in a performance building phase, I'm eating a bit more, I've been seeing my weight trend up a little bit, and then I go and do it in a deficit, you're probably going to get different things there. And then that's the other thing with blood work too, is, what you do leading up to it's going to be important. Like you probably want to take the day before, you probably want to do some lighter training. You probably don't want to do a super hard training session. Obviously making sure you're fasted heading into it. I made sure I didn't do any coffee just because I heard that from a coffee perspective, it may not impact anything, but it can skew your lipid markers and what you get there. So I was just like, you know what? I've never done this before. I can go 2 hours without coffee. There. It was tough, but I did it there. So that kind of brings me to my main sort of recovery strategies to work on that. And then I'll go a little bit more into my blood work, just a little bit more here. My main recovery strategies are going to be daily AM meditation and breath work. So trying to make, when I wake up, doing some breath work, slowing down to start my day, and then just trying to fit in slower breathing, nasal breathing, breath work throughout the day where I can. Obviously eating enough calories, protein, and carbs, and just having a well-balanced diet. That's going to help with recovery. Post-workout nutrition, I do think that this is underrated from a recovery standpoint. So making sure I'm not going too long post-workout without some sort of protein and probably even some carbohydrates there. I think that's a very important window for a lot of people. Circadian rhythm habits, so trying to keep that dialed in as much as possible, getting that morning sunlight, trying to stick to a relatively consistent sleep and wake time. In the evening, try and get into that more relaxed, downshifted state there, making sure that the room is cool, dark, I'm not sitting on my phone in bed, etc. Staying hydrated, that obviously can impact your recovery. Managing overall training intensity, making sure that I'm training, but I'm also managing training intensity, because the more you train, the more stuff you have going on, the higher your stress load is. Like, you have to watch your training intensity. Everybody needs to do this. I don't think it's a good idea to just go balls to the wall all the time without managing your intensity, but definitely want to make sure you manage. I need to make sure I manage my training intensity. That helps me with recovery there. I didn't have this on my list, but making sure I get some steps in outside of the gym and stay active outside of the gym as well too. Like I said, the sleep's the biggest thing for me. And that's probably where I'm feeling the most. Is I'm probably getting closer to 6 to 7 on average. And I think over time, if I got closer to 7 to 8, that would be better. So that's probably my biggest area. And then just general, like running your own business, there's the stressors with that. It's, can I have better practices around that? Yes. Could I spend more time getting out of my head with the business? Yes. Turning off more? Yes. But that's just not the risk, but that's just kind of the byproduct of running your own business. It's a lot harder to do that and you take those pros and cons. So again, it's just like, all right, I need to be on top of all these other things there. And I think this pattern, though, for people that enjoy training like myself, I think this pattern would be relatively common, right? Where it's like, you're doing all the things, your body's just not set up in the best position to get the most out of what you're currently doing. And so this is where I think looking under the hood is super important there. So just a few other markers, just to go over a few that I was interested in seeing, was my HS-CRP. So that's like your body's current sort of overall level of inflammation. And that was relatively low, right? So that was a thing that kind of went against what I'm saying with a high stress load. So overall inflammation's low, which is probably a good thing there. Creatinine was 1.29, which gets flagged high, but I think this is important to bring up because people will get that. And then it's like, hey, don't get off creatine, you're training too much. And so somebody that has higher amounts of muscle, you recently trained really hard and then you went and got your blood work done, like that number is going to be skewed. And so a better number to look at would be your cystatin C for that. And that was in a good spot. All good there. Iron was in a good spot. So looking at ferritin as well too, that was at 93. Once you start to get you get into the 30s or 40s, like that's where you probably want to look at iron status a bit more. I was using a glucometer leading up to this, and my fasting insulin was in the high 90s. I wasn't overly thrilled with that, but I know that those can be off. And sometimes people will have the dawn phenomenon where you wake up and cortisol is higher, so it will spike up your fasting glucose numbers. And so that's why you want to look at fasting insulin. You want to look at A1C in combination. Both of those were in a good spot. And my fasting glucose was actually at 88, which was better. Like, I would much rather be in the 80s for sure. Again, if you take your glucometer, just understand that could potentially be off there. All my lipid panels were great, so was super pumped about that. No issues there from that perspective. Other than that, everything else was in a good spot. Like I said, T3 was on the lower end. If you look at the Western range, it was totally fine. But when you look more so at the functional range, more in, say, like a healthy population, it was on the lower end. And then same thing with reverse T3 was on the higher end there, but within range in the Western medical range there. Vitamin D was in a fine spot as well too, but I'm just going to continue to take a vitamin D there with that. Cool. I think one extra thought on blood work too, right? So not only is it, okay, it's important to not just look at one marker, what are the overall patterns saying, where are they trending, where's it trending for you? I think that's a good thing to look at in general with health and fitness is where are things trending versus where you at right now. I think too many people put too much stock into where they're at right now. And it's, hey, we need to zoom out and look at the big picture there. And then it's important to get blood work done to see what's happening under the hood. And saying that, I think it's vitally important to like how someone feels is the most important, right? So you have to combine both. And what I mean by that, let's take this two different ways. So one, for myself, like I wanted to get blood work done to see long-term if there was any health issues. I've definitely felt like recovery is a little bit lower. And so when you look at my blood work, overall, it looks fine. There's not anything that really stands out. Like I said, SHBG was high, which if you just get a regular set of blood work, like you'd go into a regular doctor and just get basic blood work, like you would, all these, I probably wouldn't have gotten SHBG. I probably wouldn't have gotten free testosterone. I wouldn't have gotten it. Hey, all these are good, so you're good. But it's if you don't feel 100%, I think you should definitely look into it a bit more and see what is going on, right? Should it drastically change what you do? Probably not. I still think the basics are still super important. But if how somebody feels is super important. So that's one side of it where it's, hey, I feel like I don't necessarily feel my absolute greatest, but I also don't feel bad either. It's just, I've definitely felt recovery's a little bit lower. And I think that this sort of confirmed that there. And so now it's like, hey, I'm in a fine spot, but if you want to take things to the next level, here's some things that you can potentially do. So looking at that, but also something says that it's off, but you feel fine. I think we need to look into that. So how you feel is super important, and we shouldn't overly focus on like a number or anything like that. But again, I think the more common thing that you're going to see is, hey, from a regular blood work lab like panel may not align with how you feel, and if you don't feel great, like we definitely want to look into that a bit more. So we have to combine both here, but it can help us further refine what someone needs to work on and get more targeted with our strategies. But again, it's not going to replace the basics, right? This isn't earth-shattering for me. It's not like I need to have this crazy freaking supplement protocol now to get my SHBG down and get my free testosterone up. It's probably just, hey, like I need to be on top of recovery. And I don't need to necessarily just push more training. I have to watch my intensity, etc. there. But again, it's just not going to replace the basics. Like you still need to do those things there. It can just help us further refine what we're trying to do there with everything. Cool. I hope this was helpful. I hope this gave you more insight into my training, what I'm currently working on, how to look at blood work, what we want to look at. And also just, I feel like I went over a lot of concepts that I've been talking about, and I think it's helpful to see how I'm applying it to myself there. I guess the only other thing I didn't go over, and so I'll wrap up with this around my training, is what my training setup looks like. So I'm doing 4 days per week of lifting. So it's essentially, I'll just pull up my training. So it's Tuesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday. And within that, I'm doing, so on my first leg day, I'm doing some high jumps because I want to practice being explosive, making sure I keep that. So I'm doing that. Heel elevated back squats for quads, barbell reverse lunge for more posterior chain focus, but you're still obviously getting some quads and stuff in there. Cable standing adductor, cable standing hip adduction, right, for my adductors. So really enjoying that. I like that exercise. Seated leg curl for more hamstring development. And then I'm doing kneeling cable crunch for abs, and then seated dumbbell lateral raise to get some extra delt work in. My full upper body day, which is the following day, is sternal cable chest press. So more like kind of mid chest, just that focus there. Single arm lats pull down, again, hitting my lats. High incline dumbbell press. I'm hitting more upper chest, clavicular chest. So upper chest, and also getting some delts in on that. Chest support, dumbbell row. So again, hitting upper back with that. Dumbbell lateral raise, face away cable curls to hit my biceps in the lengthened position. And then single arm, what is this here? Single arm cable tricep extension over my shoulder there. It's hard to see, but if you can look on YouTube, it's something similar to this with the cable there. And then Friday is my pull day. With that, I start with barbell Romanian deadlift to get some extra leg volume in, to get my hip hinge in, upper back lat pull down for obviously upper back, single arm lap row. So getting a row movement in for my lats, single arm cable lateral raise to hit my delts in the lengthened position, facing cable curl. So getting more shortened position for my biceps there. And then lying cross cable Y raise, which is hitting delts across the board there. Plus good posture. I think Y raises are great from that. And just hitting upper and mid back as well too with that. And then my push day is costal chest fly press on the cables. So again, hitting that more lower pec there. Sternal press around to just get a little bit more cable, just to get more kind of flat pressing in and just build a little bit extra volume in my chest. Seated leg extension, that's my quad movement of the day. Single arm tricep push down, cable high to low, cable chop. So basically trying to get some obliques and just get some twisting in, dual overhead tricep extension, and then single leg dumbbell calf raise on there. And then on Mondays, I'll do my interval cardio, which is right now it's 2 minutes on, 2 minutes off, 7 rounds. And again, my goal is to improve my output in those and making sure I can maintain that output throughout the 7 rounds, right? I'm not trying to go balls to the wall and then my output goes down. I'm trying to maintain that. And then I'll do a medium intensity / low intensity session on Thursday, depending on what's going on. So like last night, I had to do it later in the day. With that, I just was more zone 2 kind of pace there. If I do it earlier in the day, it'll probably be closer to like more zone 3, zone 4 type pace there. So just depending on the week. And then Sundays, I'll play hockey to just so fully develop everything, right? And so that's what I'm doing. That's why I'm calling it a performance recomp phase. Or performance building phase. Performance building recomp phase. So I'm basically getting my hypertrophy in, getting my strength in. I'm trying to keep some power related in by just doing some jumps. Is that enough? Probably not, but at least is maintaining a little bit there. I'm obviously doing my cardio, doing different types of cardio as well too, not just doing mindless 45-minute runs. Like there's a goal with that. And then I'm playing hockey to do something that's semi-unpredictable. And that's a little bit different than just lifting weights and doing normal training there. And it's fun. And there's obviously the camaraderie with the other guys as well too, which it kills a lot of birds with one stone there. And that's really the only time that I get out of the house consistently is on that. Again, I hope this was helpful. Let me know if you guys have any questions on my training, blood work, etc. I hope you guys found this super helpful. If you could leave a rating and review, that will help more people find this podcast. And then if you haven't yet, give me a follow on Instagram, Jeff, HOEHN_. That's where I'm most active. And I'll talk to you guys soon.